Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. It's Michigan week, folks. And after the Purdue game with Illinois' offense giving up 40 points in the last 23 minutes of the game, people are a little nervous about this one, especially the way Purdue was running and causing Illinois all sorts of havoc. We have got on Steve Kornacki. He has been a big time supporter of Big Sports Radio. You've also heard him occasionally on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. He covers Michigan and he does the Kornacki Wolverine Report on Substack.com. So I would tell you, if you are looking for inside information on Michigan, you want somebody who has covered the team, understands the team, the culture, etc. He's the guy to go sign up for on Substack. And I can say that with 100% confidence. We selected the man that knows Michigan football. Steve, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Mike, and thanks for that introduction. When you're making that introduction, I do go back to covering. I covered Bo's last 7 seasons, and I think of walking from the parking lot to the stadium past a fraternity, and they had a big blue, like old jalopy, painted Michigan blue, and on the side painted in maize was Bo.
Yep.
And they would charge $1 to take a swipe at it with a sledgehammer.
That's my era. Yeah,
Those were the good old days.
Yes, they were. No mo Bo at the Rose Bowl. That was what everybody. They had the T-shirts, and of course, you guys have seen them at every school. Muck Fishigan. That was just the '80s, and 1983 was one of the greatest seasons I've ever been.
Illinois is the only team to ever beat every team in the conference.
And they will forever be that because
that'll never, unless they go to a 20-game schedule.
Yeah, exactly. That'll really frustrate David Williams because the Illinois All-American. He makes sure everybody knows about that.
He was a heck of a guy, heck of a player.
Yes, he was. So first off, before we get totally started on this, I wanted to throw something out there, and I know you're a student of the game. But this week is the rededication game for Sold Out Memorial Stadium. This is 100 years and 1 day after Red Grange did his 6-touchdown game against Michigan. 6 touchdowns is impressive even by today's standards, there's no doubt. But Michigan came in with a 20-game undefeated streak, and they had less than 36 points scored against them in the entirety of that streak. And so when Red Grange broke onto the national scene, that's why it was such a big deal, because he outscored 20 teams in that victory. Michigan was defending national champions. Illinois knocked them off. Here it is 100 years and 1 day later, Michigan is defending national champions and Illinois is hoping to knock them off. I don't know that that's going to happen.
I love the history, and Red Grange was the Babe Ruth of college football, and they played at the same time in the 20s. And you know what? He does compare very favorably to Babe Ruth in those kinds of ways, because one time I looked it up, and the year that Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, it was more than any other team in the American League hit.
Yes.
More home runs than any team in the league hit. So that, it's like Ruthian or Grangian or, whatever. Those guys are just off the charts, tremendous impact players who popularized attending big sporting events. I mean, people wanted to go see Babe Ruth. They wanted to go see Red Grange. And that must have been a heck of a day.
There was one other one in the big three, which was Jack Dempsey.
Yeah.
And so you had Jack Dempsey drawing 100,000 people or 90-something thousand to watch a boxing match.
Yeah.
The thing that makes Red Grange so interesting to me, we've had on 2 authors. One was Doug Vilhard, who wrote a historical fiction about Red Grange, and the other was Chris Willis, who works for NFL Films, who did a biography of Red Grange. And the interesting thing is Red Grange did everything that a modern player wants to do. He got an agent, which in those days was unheard of. He then went to a professional sport, so he did that. he went to Hollywood and made movies, and they were very popular. In fact, he was asked by Hollywood producers to retire from football and just make movies. And he said, "No, I'm a football player." And then when he was done with his career, before anybody really started doing it, he started doing football games on radio in Chicago. And then he did football games on television for college football, and even did some bowl games. So he did everything that a modern player would like to do. I'd like to be a movie star. I'd like to be on TV. If Red would have come along a little sooner, he probably would have been a podcaster too. Who knows?
And he was the model for Tom Harmon. I mean, what you were saying there, Mike, that's Tom Harmon's career. Tom Harmon of Michigan, they made a movie about him, and he ended up marrying an actress, and they had a son and a daughter who both went off to Hollywood, and the son, Mark Harmon, obviously everybody's heard of, but he had a sister who also was a popular actress, and probably bigger in the Detroit area than anywhere else. But so Red Grange kind of not set the tone, but set up
He was the template.
Tom Harmon and others to be a star, basically.
I didn't put that into perspective until Chris Willis of NFL Films and I were talking about it. And you're like, holy cow, he was blazing a trail. And it was only 100 years ago when he started blazing it. So anyway, so let's zoom in here. Illinois comes in 5-1, only the fourth time they've been 5-1 or better since 1990. They did it in 2001. They did it in 2022. They did it in 2024. So two of those times were Bret Bielema, and they were 5-1 those 3 seasons. And of course, everybody remembers the infamous 2011 season where they started 6-0 under Ron Zook and then proceeded to lose the next 6 games. But this is unusual. And of course, Michigan comes in with a 4-2 record. I expected them to struggle against Texas. I was not expecting them to struggle so much against Washington.
No, I'm kind of with you exactly.
And so
those are my thoughts.
There's 2 things I'd like you to give your opinion of. The first one is, I know there was a lot of things going on in the offseason because Jim Harbaugh was involved. I get it.
Yeah.
But I think it was just crazy that they didn't go after a quarterback in the portal, if nothing else, as an insurance policy. And the second thing is, I really thought, and the season isn't over yet, but I really thought this was going to be a generationally great Michigan defense. And it's been a good defense, but it hasn't been that level that I expected.
Yeah, that's correct. And, it is surprising that this defense hasn't been more dominant, because it has dominant players. You got Will Johnson, who's acclaimed by everyone as the best cover cornerback in college football, and he had another pick 6 in the USC game, his third pick 6. Geez, that's pretty darn good. And so many big games. Will Johnson made huge. Ohio State last year had an interception early in the game. Big Ten championship games, interceptions, late in the game. He's really set the tone. And while he hasn't had a bad year, I've seen him get beat, not on deep passes, but on like intermediate passes, unlike he ever has before. And he's a junior. Not a lot, but some. It used to be like Texas didn't even throw at him,
Right.
and so he's kind of not taking the step up that he has been hurt in his defense at times. But and then they've got Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham in the middle, and those 2 guys are beasts. And,
Yes.
and Michigan, I'm going to look at my notes now. Pro Football Focus has them as the top pass rush unit in the country, and their 13 sacks lead the Big Ten, and 15 or the sack leader is Josiah Stewart with 5. So they bring the heat, and any quarterback who can't handle the heat usually wilts against Michigan, and that's a real challenge. The constant heat, and they really thump you too. I mean, they bring guys down, and they bring them down hard. And It's almost like the old Al Davis, Oakland Raiders owner and coach. The mantra: the quarterback must go down on the first possession, and he said it much more graphically than that.
Yeah.
But his point was that you got to get in the quarterback's head immediately, and these guys will do that, and they still have that. They're still a pretty good tackling team, but last year Michigan was the surest tackling team I ever saw. It was phenomenal. Every game, it seemed like there was only one guy who broke a tackle and went another 5 yards. It's like, what's a game? Like, never. Like, if there was somebody close to him, now it's like 3 times a game that happens. And they're still a very good defense, but they're not. I think they really miss Mike Sainers still. Zeke Berry has done a good job in that role in the backfield. But I think Sainers still didn't get as much pub as he deserved. And he's already making an impact as a pro football player, demanding the time and getting it. And I think they miss him. And here's the other thing: they lost 13 players to the NFL draft last year. And something that never gets talked about is it's a 10-man coaching staff. Only 3 of these guys were here last year. And Grant Newsome was the tight ends coach. Now he's the offensive line coach. I think he's going to be a really great offensive line coach, but it's his first year.
Right.
And so, and Kurt Campbell is back. He was the quarterback's coach. Now he's also the offensive coordinator. And Ron Bellamy is back again as the wide receivers coach, but everybody else has changed, and that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but you've got new players with new coaches. So you almost have a new program in some ways. The core of it is the same. They demand, that these kids are extremely hard workers, extremely great teammates, selfless. The culture is still the same. There's a love among the teammates and the coaches that Sharon Moore has maintained. But it's taken them a while, and they're still trying to pull everything together because there's so much that has changed.
This is the run my own business dream. This is the college is paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
The guy I looked at was when Malik Murphy left Texas. Big, strong arm quarterback who was stuck behind Quinn Ewers, and then, of course, had the unenviable task of being the guy right ahead of Arch Manning. And he ended up going to Duke. And when I saw a guy like that, I just thought to myself, but why wouldn't Michigan try to throw their hat in the ring and see if they could outbid Duke? And
that's a good point. My son Derek, who co-writes the Kornacki Wolverine report and takes photos, he was one of the first to say, why didn't they go in the portal and get somebody? Because none of the quarterbacks that we've seen look like the kind of quarterback who can win a championship. They just don't. I mean, they've got good qualities and they're first-time starters, and so that's not easy. But the guy who looks the most able to lead a team to victory is Jack Tuttle. But then he self-destructed down the stretch with a fumble and an interception in the fourth quarter of the loss to Washington, a team that Michigan should have beat even on the road, I believe. So,
yeah,
it is what it is. They do have an outstanding freshman, Jaden Davis, who is a 4-star recruit from Fort Mill, South Carolina, who really loves it here. And you'll see him on the sidelines, and for whatever reason, he's not gotten a chance to, and he's got to be the next guy to get a chance. And we don't go to practices, so we don't know, where he is as a player. If he's not ready as a player, he's not ready. But I think that the time will be soon that he may have that experience and that they will put him in. And he's a guy who can throw and run and supposedly do it all. So I'm sure he'll be on the trip to Champaign.
So when Illinois goes on defense and they have to play against the Michigan offense, Sharon Moore's the man who called 32 straight runs against Penn State. Illinois has struggled. I will give Aaron Henry, Bret Bielema, the defensive players. They knew the defensive line was paper thin. They knew the linebackers were not as deep as they hoped to be. And yet, throughout this 5-1 start, Illinois has given up run yards, but they've suckered teams into passing. They've been able to withstand and keep themselves in games. Even Penn State, that was close. They kept the score closer than maybe the game really was. Do you think Michigan is just going to come in and take a look at the yards per carry that Illinois has given up and just say, you know what, we're going to run the ball until they stop them? Could this be like a 1980s game when Bo Schembechler, if he ran a dive right and you didn't stop it, he was going to run it 25 times until you did?
This could be a game where if Michigan has success running, they might only throw 13 times. They might just throw a handful of times a quarter, to keep things honest. If they can move the ball on the ground, in that Penn State game last year, the 32 straight times, there was a pass in there.
Oh, there was. Okay.
It was an incomplete pass.
All right.
So all the yardage was on the ground in that amount of time. And and at times they've shown like that they can really, they can really run like last year when they had an offensive line that all went to the NFL. And they've got some young kids and at times they look really good. But what they do have is Kalel Mullings, who his second effort, we thought he saved the season, but then they lost to Washington.
Yeah.
Against USC with just an unbelievable 63-yard run.
Yep.
With such great second effort and spun away and bounced off a guy and outraced him and finally got pulled down, near the goal line. This kid has a tremendous spirit, kind of like Blake Corum, where, he just will not be denied. Just he has another gear that even a lot of great running backs don't have. And then Donovan Edwards, who some thought would be a Heisman Trophy candidate this year, I wondered if he might be, and he's doing okay. But the starter is now Kalel Mullings, and Donovan's had some good plays, and his blocking has really improved, and he's real close to becoming the receiving leader as a for a running back at Michigan. Let's see, what does he have here? He's 51 yards away from passing Anthony Thomas.
Wow.
For the most receiving yards from a Michigan back. So he does a lot, and he's a great leader, and he's a great kid. But Michigan, definitely has again. Max Bredesen, the fullback, is an unsung hero on this team. He's a tremendous blocker, a really tough kid. And so they really come at you, out of the backfield. And while the line isn't as good as last year's, it's a totally new line. Colston Loveland is back at tight end. He's fantastic. He's also a very good blocker. Some think he'll be a first round pick and the first tight end drafted. To answer your question, Mike, if Michigan has success running the ball, they could just keep handing it off and pass when it's there and pass enough to keep things honest.
Well, who's gonna start at quarterback, and what do we expect? Do you think it is going to be Tuttle? And my problem is every time I hear the word Tuttle, I'm old enough that I just think of Captain Tuttle back on that episode of MASH, the guy who didn't exist.
I think it will be Tuttle. He just seems to have the best command of the offense and the best ability to run a team of the three guys that they've used. And Alex Orji is a tremendous runner and is a really good leader, but he hasn't shown that he can complete a pass longer than 10 or 12 yards, which is crazy because there's a YouTube video of him in high school, and he played in Satsy, Texas.
Okay.
And he's rolling right, and he's under heavy pressure. He's rolling right, and he's right-handed quarterback. And he stops and throws across his body 60 yards in the air, hits a guy on the run for like a 85-yard touchdown. So it's in there, it's in there. But he hasn't been able to make it come out.
You know who did that against Illinois in a game? Drew Henson had a touchdown pass almost exactly like that
He did.
against Illinois. Yeah, that guy, what a rifle! I mean, that guy could throw. It looked like he shot out of a cannon.
And the funny story about him is he was the greatest schoolboy quarterback to come out of a Michigan high school, even greater than Rick Leach, out of Brighton High School, and a huge recruit. Michigan fans were ecstatic. He committed after his junior year to Lloyd Carr, and huge things were expected of him. And I left Michigan for a little while to cover the Detroit Tigers, and they had a guy named Greg Jeffries who used to play for the Phillies and the Mets on that team. And Greg and I like to talk about a lot of stuff, including college football. His dad was the baseball coach at Tom Brady's high school, Sarah High School, in the Bay Area, in San Mateo. And his dad coached, get a load of this, Barry Bonds. So, I mean, his dad was a great high school baseball coach. And so Greg Jeffries was a big Tom Brady fan, and he kept telling me, he's going to beat out Henson. He's going to beat out Henson. And I said, well, I expect you to be behind your guy, to be loyal to the guy from your alma mater. And that's all nice and everything like that. But there's no way he's going to beat out Henson.
Yeah.
And eventually he did. And Henson's NFL career was like a couple passes with the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't have to tell you about Tom Brady's career.
Yeah. I've heard of that guy.
You heard of him. So it's, sometimes what we see in sports is just incredible. The guys that can't, that are sure things aren't, and the guys who nobody really has much confidence in, they just work hard. They just plug. They just believe in themselves. They just keep, and they get a chance, and they make good on it. And that's what Tom Brady did.
So, think they are going to do the run until they get stopped, or do you think they could try to surprise and
they have tried to come out throwing in a game or two this year. So, and that's to throw the opponent off, obviously. So you just don't know. But how good of coverage guys does Illinois have?
Their coverage guys are pretty good. Their DBs are good. They took a lot of beatings last year as young players, but when you take a look at Illinois the last few years, they have done a wonderful job of recruiting guys who are fairly athletic, fairly fast, and good at pass.
Yeah, Michigan has some able wide receivers like Samaj Morgan and Tyler Morris that they've had a play here and a play there, but they really haven't stepped up. And to be a big time receiver who can be counted on. So what I would expect is kind of what has been happening lately, which is run the ball and pass to Colston Loveland. And for a quarterback who isn't a deep threat, a tight end is a great security blanket. And if you can successfully hit Colston Loveland often enough and your running game's going, you're going to score points. You don't have to have a dynamic wide receiver against everybody and in every game if you've got those things, and they do. So, but for instance, when they nearly lost to Minnesota, it all began with he had Colston Loveland, and I've got to name the quarterback because we've had three. Yeah. Alex Orji underthrew Colston Loveland, who he had for a touchdown. And Michigan was up by like 20 some points at that time, but it changed the momentum of that game. And Michigan held on by the skin of their teeth and won. We've got a great field goal kicker at Michigan, and he bailed them out.
Yeah, I know Illinois can match them there with not one but two pretty good kickers, David Alano, and then they've even got a kicker who can go long distance as well with a 59-yarder this year. On defense, is Illinois? My concern is they won't be able to run the ball. And once you go one-dimensional against Michigan, I'm assuming the pass rush gets just nightmarish.
Yeah, if Illinois doesn't have a back that Michigan has to give great respect to, then they will tee off on the quarterback, for sure.
How do you think this game is going to play?
Well, you've got number 22 Illinois against number 24 Michigan, and that tells you that they're pretty comparable teams. So it should be a close game, and it's at Illinois. Um, I, my gut feeling, and it probably is mostly hinged on like the Purdue game, because I was starting to think Purdue might have the worst team in the Big Ten, in a very weird year where Indiana is 6-0, and who even knows if they're any good?
Yeah, they haven't played anybody.
Yeah, they haven't played anybody. Now they might be really good. They might end up being like that Illinois team that you talked about, and end up at 6-6 or 7-5 or something like that. I don't think that'll happen, but anyways, you keep surveying the Big Ten, like who is the worst team out of these 18 teams, and I'd kind of thought I'd come around to the point where I thought it was Purdue, and to see Purdue almost beat Illinois and like score that many points, even though they were late, makes me really want. I may have picked Illinois if Illinois had in this game, if they had soundly beaten Purdue. But I think because of how, and Michigan is hardly a sure thing themselves.
Right.
I kind of see Michigan winning by a touchdown. And a very good game. I think a very entertaining game. And I think Bielema is a great coach. I think he was a great hire for Illinois, and he's getting them where they've been and where they want to be. And so it's, I think it's going to be a real good, real entertaining game.
From your perspective, why did you think Bret Bielema was a really good hire for Illinois? And then once you're done with that, how do you look at what he's doing with the program from afar?
Red Grange wasn't just a football player, he was a legend. Discover the untold story of Illini great Red Grange in a new novel by Doug Vilhard called The Golden Age of Red. This captivating book takes you back to the 1920s, when a humble young Illinois player transformed into the galloping ghost and electrified the nation. Get your copy of The Golden Age of Red by Doug Vilhard today. Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
I think because of what he did at Wisconsin, that Arkansas must not have been a good fit for him, and I can't go into great detail as to why he wasn't a great fit down there, but he wouldn't be the first coach to come from the North and not succeed in the South. The culture is different. Recruiting is different. And back in the days, and this has changed because everybody gets paid now, but I don't know if it impacted, Coach Bielema, doing things honestly in recruiting and going into a conference where a lot of them weren't doing things honestly. I don't know if that's part of the reason that he wasn't highly successful or not. I'm just hypothesizing, and
Right.
It could be true, but I just think he's kind of a Midwestern guy, and he was highly successful, at another Big Ten school, and I thought that's good for him. I mean, he's going to have a chance to, show what he can do, and you can tell how much his players enjoy him, and that comes out. I watch a lot on the sidelines, like what's going on, and what's the interaction like, to see what a coach like that coach at Arizona State. If you've been watching any of their games, holy cow, Dillingham, that guy's a comer. Like he is. And I say that because I watch how he interacts with his players on the sideline and his attitude, and he's brought in the kind of players that will win. And that's what Bret's done here. He's brought in the kind of players that win. And 2 years ago, at Michigan, that was the toughest game that Michigan played, up until they got beat by TCU, in the national championship semifinal. In fact, our NFL kicker now with the San Francisco 49ers, Moody, won that game for us. Gosh, Illinois played a heck of a game in that game.
How is the Illinois program perceived under him from afar now, as opposed to, let's say, the challenging way Illinois has played football the last 20 years prior to him showing up?
The word that comes to mind, Mike, is solid. Just solid. He does everything the right way, does everything well, and if he gets the right players, he's going to win a lot. And he's establishing a winning program right now, and And once you've established a winning program, then you try to establish a championship program, and that'll be his next step that he'll try to take. And he knows how to do that. So it'll be all right. I mean, Illinois is a great recruiting spot. The city of Chicago, the talent in the suburbs and everywhere. I mean, thinking J.J. McCarthy, came out as, huge Blackhawks fan.
Over the years, as Illinois fans, we've learned to live with the fact that you're going to have a certain percentage of your best players go to Notre Dame, Michigan, and then over the last 30 years, Wisconsin and Iowa have gotten in there as well. And obviously you've always had to worry about Ohio State or Alabama or somebody like that parachuting in to the very top end. And it's up to Bret Bielema to try to reverse these decades of recruiting slides that Illinois had. And that doesn't happen overnight. But I just wanted to get your opinion of how he's doing, just because we're so close to it as Illini fans that we don't always see that.
And this is what year is he in?
He's in his 4th year now.
Yeah. So he's right about where he should be. And I think he has him on track. And can he take him to the next level? That's what remains to be seen. But is he capable of it? Definitely.
Yep. I'm actually a little worried about this game. I think Michigan is a rough matchup because Illinois has struggled to deal with running the ball, and Michigan has 2 phenomenal defensive tackles that will make that hard. And then Illinois has struggled to stop people from running, and Michigan is able to do that. The thing I think is probably the biggest opportunity area for the Illini is if there is a coach who's seen more gimmick defenses to stop the run than Bret Bielema. I'm not certain who that is, because running has been such a big part of his game offensively over the years, that I'm hoping he can go back through the Rolodex in his brain and say, oh, I hated playing against this one, and this was hard too. And maybe he can dream up or pull out a few gimmicks that other guys have tried to use on him and try to use those on Michigan this week. That's the benefit of having an experienced coach who's been through.
He knows what to go back to and what might work, and what, have a couple things that might work. But the thing with Michigan is generally sometimes both, but almost automatically either Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant are going to be double teamed, and that opens up somebody, right?
Exactly.
And you've got, for the sack purposes, you got Stewart, and then you got Ernest Hausman, a really good linebacker who leads Michigan with 40 tackles. And he's in his 2nd year after leaving Nebraska as a true freshman, where he played a lot for them as a true freshman. So he's a guy that you don't hear about a lot, but he really sticks it to people. And, anytime you double team, if you've got people that can make them pay, they're going to. And Michigan has those kind of players.
Yeah. And then the final thought is special teams wise, you hinted at it a little bit, but how's Michigan on special teams?
Well, they've got a kicker that came from Arkansas State, and he's got 2 years left. This guy, Dominic Zavada, Zvada, is 8 for 8, and 4 of those are 50 yards or more.
Wow.
I mean, he is dynamite. He kind of reminds me of Jake Moody. And in fact, Mason Graham kind of dropped that comparison in a post-game press conference that, he's kind of becoming Moody for us here. And the punter, Tommy Doman, Pro Football Focus had him the 6th rated punter in the country. He gets really good hang time. He can kill the ball inside the 20, and he also kicks off. He's the kickoff guy, and he consistently puts them in the end zone. So their kickers are very sound. They have good tackling units. I think, Jay Harbaugh was a great special teams coordinator for Michigan. He's now with the Seattle Seahawks. He's not with his dad in L.A.
Right.
But, and they have, they've got some J.B. Brown, is the new coordinator, and he's doing a good job. They're still very sound in that side. And in terms of the legs, they're very strong in that department.
Sounds like it's going to be a good matchup. Have they been okay on the return side? Illinois had some early season issues with people getting handles on punts, but they seem to have ironed that out and moved past that.
Yeah, Michigan's pretty sound on the return game. Yeah, they're they seldom give up very much in that regard.
And then final question is, Michigan by a touchdown. You got any idea how many points you think are going to be scored by these two teams? Their defenses have played relatively well, but I got to give Illinois a little bit of a flyer after 40 points in 23 minutes. But up until then, Illinois had played pretty well. And like I said, even against Penn State, they managed to keep the Nittany Lions down.
Maybe something like 31-24.
Okay.
Maybe a little lower than that. That sounds about right.
Perfect.
And it'll be a game that'll be won in the fourth quarter. Whoever can do their best there is going to win the game.
Steve, we really appreciate having you on this week. If you are looking to keep up on the Wolverines, or you just want to make sure you keep an eye on them so they don't pull any more stunts, then get the Kornacki Wolverine report on Substack.com. You will get all the latest information on what's going on with the Wolverines from Steve and his son. Thank you very much. And of course, as we've talked before, if you are looking for the best in Illini information, you have IlliniGuys.com. You get 1 week to kick the tires. We bill you on the 7th day. Still $99 a year. That's one of the best deals there is going. We have not raised our prices regardless of pandemic or post-pandemic. We'd love to have you there. And of course, be listening for us on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. That's on 20 plus stations throughout the state of Illinois. Go to IlliniGuys.com, hit the radio button. You can find where you can listen, if it's on Friday or Saturday and what time. And we also have our Big Ten show, Big Sports Radio. Be looking for that as well. If you can't tune in locally, you can always get the podcast of either one. And folks, until next time, go Illini.